All right, what is going on, everybody? Welcome back to SaberSim's DFS Office Hours. It is Wednesday, June 8th of 2022. If this is your first time watching Office Hours, my name's Jordan. I'm the head coach here at SaberSim, and Office Hours is an open Q&A style live stream where I answer questions from the SaberSim community about SaberSim, about DFS, whatever you guys want to talk about. If you have questions you would like me to answer on this show, you can email us at support@sabersim.com. If you are joining me here live today, you can post your questions live in the YouTube chat. Oh, I just realized I never pulled my microphone over, so I probably sounded pretty quiet here to those of you watching here. Hopefully that sounds a little bit better. Anyway, you can ask questions live in the YouTube chat, and you can ask questions in our Slack channel, the Office Hours channel in Slack. Of course, if you haven't already joined Slack, there is a link to join in the description of every past Office Hours show. Coming up later this week, some exciting news here. I'll have Matt on tomorrow in the first probably 20 to 30 minutes of Office Hours here to talk about some updates we are making this week to the lineup builder. It comes with a suite of changes here. A lot of them are going to be kind of more back-end changes here that I think will probably improve some of the performance, some of the build speed things there. But there is a big change overall to the way that we are handling correlation. We talked a little bit about this here. I've teased this in the past couple weeks. I will let Matt explain what exactly this is and what it does and tout the benefits of the correlation changes tomorrow. So I won't go too deep into that here today, but come join me on tomorrow's stream and ask any questions you have to Matt live here. Or if you have questions, if you already know what questions you want to ask, you can pop them into the Office Hours channel in Slack for tomorrow's stream. But come listen to Matt talk a little bit tomorrow. I'm going to have some questions for him. I'm super excited about this. Should just be a general, a really positive change for the way that we handle correlation in general. So looking forward to it. Again, I think the plan is that is supposed to go live basically tomorrow morning. So the update to the app itself should go live tomorrow morning, and then we'll be able to talk about it on stream in the afternoon. That is what I understand is what we're doing there. So looking forward to that. Again, come check out the stream tomorrow, and we'll have that conversation there. But for today, we already have some questions in our queue, so we'll go ahead and just jump in shortly here. Only a handful, I would say, in the queue here for today so far. So if you have questions for me, fire away at me now. Get your questions in the queue. We'll answer questions in chronological order, approximately speaking. And we're going to start with a question from Ted here, and a good one to get started with here. And Ted said, what are your thoughts on aggregating projections? Looking to do this for PGA. If projections are on a different, for lack of a better word, scale, SaberSim has Cam Smith as top player at 84 points, and another source has their top guy at, say, 94 points. Should I be doing something to get them all on the same scale before running sims? I'm going to start with kind of the first question here and talk about this from a more general stance. I don't think aggregating projections is a very good value add for most DFS players. Basically, what you are going to get out of aggregating projections is a rounding of the corners, a kind of a softening of the most outlier projected players in any one given projection system. And all projection systems are going to have this issue, right? No projection system is going to be perfect. There's always going to be kind of some outlier players based on what the inputs are to that system, how those inputs are weighted differently across different systems, where there are going to be players where, consistently even maybe those players are a little bit over or under projected by that system. I would say 80 to probably even 90+% of players in a DFS slate, I think you'll probably find are going to be pretty close to one another by most systems here, right? And then you have maybe those outliers there where, as you aggregate projections, maybe if there's kind of a 10% of players are a little bit, let's put it this way, maybe 10% of players are outside, I don't know, a standard deviation away from the mean of all of the other projection systems. I don't even know if mathematically that makes sense or if that's what the number is, but let's say 10% of players in a given system are kind of off from the mean of the other systems, right? As you add in, if you have like an aggregate of 5 different projection models, right? That you're hoping basically that each model has a different kind of set of outliers that get essentially smoothened out by the other systems. But the reason why I don't think you're going to need this for most players is it just doesn't add a ton of value unless you are playing at a very high bankroll. I don't think it does a lot. I think there are way more better uses of time for the average player than going around and trying to aggregate projections, personally. On SaberSim, you get an aggregating, I don't even want to say an aggregating, you get because Sim Precision builds your lineups in a way that does not overly weight the average projections to begin with, and you get a nice moderate exposure that is appropriate for the contest you're playing to players automatically, I think using a tool like SaberSim makes the need to aggregate even less important, right? A very highly projected player on average in some other model used with a traditional optimizer, right? You're going to have this compounding effect where, because that player just happens to project as the best overall player on the slate on average, right? You are going to get a ton of him in your lineups because of the way traditional optimizers work. We could take a player like, for example, Oscar Gonzalez tonight and maybe say, maybe this is a player that is a bit of a SaberSim outlier. For one reason or the other, our simulations really like Oscar Gonzalez, right? He's the best overall projected hitter on the slate by value. Well, because of the fact that we're actually going to pull from a real distribution for Oscar Gonzalez, it is not as if he's going to get jammed into a ton of lineups at once, right? Now, aggregating projections and maybe finding that his projection comes down to, 6.5, 6.45 might be one way that, that could get kind of smoothened out. Another way of smoothing that out would just be using his direct outcomes here, his real distributions, which is what SaberSim does, and only using him in the lineup when he has the high upside outcomes, which are in his distribution, even if his true mean is 5.5 or 6.5 or 6.25 or something like that. At some point, if you're playing a ton of volume, it's going to make sense to just take into account some level of the wisdom of the crowd and look at other models and maybe do some kind of aggregation here. But I don't think it makes sense until you're at a pretty significantly high volume where there is actually that little bit of additional value that gets added there. I think incorporating more and more projection models and more systems into your aggregate sometimes gets treated as the skeleton key of DFS. Like, oh, if I just add one more system in here, everything will start working. And I think that is a mistake. And I think I don't think it is really that. In terms of scaling, I think this is an interesting idea. I know Kurt was talking about this here in the SaberSim Slack this past week. I don't know. I think it's interesting. When I've experimented with doing a little bit of this myself, I have never really kind of worried about that. I think, like, for golf in particular, right? If SaberSim projects 85.4 fantasy points as the highest overall average projected golfer, and you have some other system that is projecting 94 points as the highest overall golfer, to me, for golf specifically, what that's implying is there's a discrepancy in the way that those two systems are thinking about how difficult the course is going to play, period, right? SaberSim probably thinks the course is going to play a little tougher, and another model might think that the course is going to play a little bit easier in that regard. Like, I don't know if I would scale the top overall player unless there was an extreme discrepancy between those two, which would probably be more concerning. I would probably be more concerned if there was an extreme discrepancy between those two about the reliability of that other model, really. But in general, right, I think if you were to take that aggregate there, I don't know if I would want to do any scaling, because I would also want to aggregate that perspective of the course difficulty itself, I guess. Or same deal, we can take the analogy even to baseball, right? If there was a difference in the way that the top overall projected, if there was a difference in the total overall points, right? The total overall hitting points on the slate, where SaberSim said, on a 10-game slate, there's
I don't know, just as an example, 1,000 total overall hitting points out there, and some other model says there's 1,200 average hitting points available out there. Well, that to me, that is a discrepancy of just overall how the models are projecting that the hitting conditions for that particular slate. I could be wrong here. I would be very happy to have this. Is one of those things where I would happily have my mind changed if somebody has a different opinion. I don't know how important it is to scale systems like that unless there is an extreme discrepancy between the average projections of those systems. And in that case, I would just be more concerned about whatever other model you're looking at. If it differs in the total fantasy points available out there on average by a big factor from what SaberSim has, I just don't know if I would trust that model personally, right? So anyway, all of this to say, at some point, if you're playing extremely high volume, you are going to get some value out of looking at different models to take into account the wisdom of the crowd and smooth out mostly those outliers, right? That said, projection aggregation is not a skeleton key. It is not the secret to beating DFS any more than average projections of any one singular model are the skeleton key to beating DFS. So I guess really, to sum it all up here, I would say I think there is some value added there of smoothing out the outliers, and you really have to make the determination if in your DFS process it is worth the time and the money to do this, basically. I think for most players, there are a lot of better places where you can add value to the process by either doing your own research, spending time, adjusting your exposures and managing your risk on SaberSim, other things like that before you would maybe just jump to try to aggregate a bunch of different projection systems together. But interesting question there. Good one to start with. And let's keep it going here. Okay. Okay, so this was a question from Dwayne here as a follow-up to our contest selection video. And before I answer this, I should mention it. Last Friday, I had Eric on stream here for about an hour and a half talking about his research into contest selection. We previewed, or not even previewed, I would say we premiered our new contest selection framework based on Eric's research he's been doing this past month. It is a bit of a shift from the way that we used to look at contest selection, which was basically maximizing EV, maximizing theoretical EV, to a more portfolio-based approach where you find a balance of minimizing risk while maximizing your upside. So if you are interested in that and you haven't seen it already, go watch the video from Friday. It's in the Office Hours channel it's in the Office Hours playlist on our YouTube channel. I definitely go check that out. But Dwayne had a follow-up question here to that and said, one thing I forgot to ask on stream was regards to the 1,000 effective entrants rule. I'm a beginner at MLB, and I noticed these contests rarely have 1,000 effective entrants. Does that not matter due to the fact that MLB is such a high variance sport? I wondered why FanDuel and DK are both way under in the contest creation for this sport as opposed to NBA, if you have any idea. Yeah, so, I mean, I guess, first of all, on the baseball thing, it's just a less popular DFS sport. And in fact, I think one of the sad things about baseball in particular is it seems like it's a shrinking DFS sport. It seems like the contests are getting smaller as time goes on. NFL and NBA in particular, definitely feel like they're growing DFS sports. Another growing DFS sport, golf. The contest sizes seem like they just get bigger and bigger after every year. Baseball, it kind of seems like they're getting a little bit smaller. So it is harder to find those contests with a lot of effective entrants. On the effective entrants note here, I think it is still a good tool to use as a bit of I would say almost a tiebreaker for your elevator contests, right? We found in our research that it is, you can squeeze out a little bit of additional expected value by playing a contest that has a little bit, has more effective entrants, but you also significantly increase your variance because of how big those contests have to get to have 1,000 effective entrants. So what I would basically do is within your elevator contests, right? So these are, when I talk about the elevators, right? These are the ROI boosters. These are the high effective entrance contests that, when you get the right lineup into that particular contest, it gives you a big opportunity to realize some of your edge very quickly, some of your EV very quickly, right? As opposed to the diversifiers. So the diversifiers are the 20 max, 150 max kind of contests where you can get a lot of lineups in play and smooth out your variance. So when you're looking, I would say in particular, when you're looking at the elevator contests, I think effective entrance can be a good tool to break ties, basically. What you want to do based on our new framework here is, let's say you were filling out your elevator type contest, right? So you're filling up the single entries first. You're filling up the single entries and 3 maxes by lowest to highest entry fee, right? So as you're filling these out, I would say, you can use effective entrance as a tiebreaker. I would, for example, probably prefer to play something like the chin music, the $5 chin music, which is going to have 2378 effective entrance, before I'd want to play the 5-tool player, which is a $5 3 max, which is only going to have, a little over 100 effective entrance. So basically to sum up here, I would say basically what we have found is, the maximizing effective entrance framework that we used to think about before had definitely had some value, right? What it did is it would basically give you a path to maximizing EV, but it was an extremely high variance strategy. So I think effective entrance is still something important to look at when you are breaking ties in those elevator type contests, but I would not seek to maximize it at all costs anymore, based on the old framework that we were working from. I would use it as a tiebreaker for those ROI booster elevator type contests. But the first thing I would be looking at is filling lowest to highest entry fee first. So, another good example is on the diversifier contests. So things like I have been playing more Minimax, and getting into some of these 150 max type contests, which is a contest that you would never really have gotten into before with our old recommendations of effective entrance here. And what we found in our simulations, our contest sims, and our research here is that these can actually be decent contests to play here as diversifying contests. They allow you to get a lot of lineups in play very cheaply, and spread out some of your risk there. So let me know if that's clear, if that helps. Okay. Right. So, let's go ahead. So, Ameem, I see your question here. There was a question about our golf simulation make cut percentages. I sent that question internal. I am not sure. So I'll read this question here. And I will give a guess here, but this is a question that I'm going to take back to the team here and maybe try to give you a more intelligent answer by tomorrow's stream here. Or maybe even, I know the event starts tomorrow. So maybe if I hear back from the team, I'll respond to you again further in Slack. The question says, it appears the PGA make cut percentages are regressed to a mean relative to available odds. Top golfers are lower, mid golfers are about the same, low golfers are higher. Is this something to do with how the sim runs? And I don't have a very good answer here at the moment. So yeah, it looks like based on what you just sent over here, that our make cut percentages for some of these golfers here, for the top golfers, is a little bit lower than what the betting markets indicate. It's a little bit higher on the lowest side here. I am not sure what the actual answer is to that. What my gut is telling me is that this says something more about the make cut market than it does about our simulations and about what side of these markets the sportsbooks want action on. I'm not sure. I don't know. This is on the edge of what I feel like I actually can answer intelligently here. But my guess is that this is something more about the markets than the simulations themselves. I'm not sure also how many sportsbook here actually have two-way markets set up here. So I don't know what the juice on the betting markets looks like here as well. Anyway, I want to ask the team and get a little bit more information on maybe what those discrepancies looks like and see if we can come up with kind of why that happens there. So I will follow up when I have some more information for you with that. I don't want to make something up here. Anyway, question from Patrick. Jordan, what contest setting would you recommend when entering winner take all, GPP or cash for PGA? Could this be applied to other DFS sports as well? I would use the satellite settings. So satellites essentially are going to mimic a winner take all. They are essentially, the very top heavy satellites basically are winner take alls where there's one ticket up top that everybody's playing for. I would use the satellite settings to mimic that. They are basically going to be more aggressive GPP settings. They're going to be a little bit higher on the ownership fade and the sim precision than the GPPs. And yes, I definitely think it could be applied to other DFS sports as well. I would use the satellites for any winner take alls. If you are grouping, I will say if you end up grouping your winner take alls with your other contests and want to build everything together, the GPP settings are probably not going to kill you. They're probably going to actually work pretty well for winner take alls as well. Because, in a GPP, the optimal outcome is still a top 0.1, top 1% finish, right? But I think if you were being very specific with your slider selections, I would prefer the satellites settings for a winner take all contest. Enigma Gaming says, in the video about contest selection and bankroll management you released last week, you said you should only use 2.5% to 5% of your bankroll. Is that per day or per slate? Because in League of Legends, for example, you can have 3 slates in the same day. So should you split the 2 to 5% or use 2 to 5% per slate? I would say use 2.5 to 5% of your bankroll in each uncorrelated slate. So if a slate shares games with another slate, those slates are correlated. Your results in one are going to be somewhat correlated to your results in the other. So that is where it gets kind of complicated. So I would say you can probably feel safe using 2.5 to 5% of your bankroll in any uncorrelated slates that don't share any games together, right? So, an example here, let's look at baseball tonight. So and I know your question is about League of Legends here, but I'm just going to illustrate this with an example here. For baseball, if this would load here, we'll give this the good old fashioned hard refresh here. Okay, so for example, the 640 turbo is completely uncorrelated to the 705 main. None of these games are on the main slate. So you could, if you were playing both, I would say you could use 2.5 to 5% of your bankroll in both of these different slates and proceed that way. They are uncorrelated. However, if you were playing, the 705 main slate and also the night slate, these two slates are correlated because these 3 games are on the main slate. At that point, it gets kind of tricky. It gets hard because they're not one-to-one correlated. They're not the identical slate. They're somewhat correlated. So how much bankroll should you play there? I would probably say that I would not exceed more than 5% to 10% of my bankroll total on a day of correlated slates. I wouldn't spend any more than 2.5 to 5% on any one slate, and I wouldn't play any more. I wouldn't play any more than 5% to 10% on a set of correlated slates. That might be a little bit too aggressive. It depends a little bit on your risk tolerance and what your actual risk of ruin is. If you are calculating from a bankroll that is your true total bankroll, like if you lost 100% of it, you would quit DFS indefinitely, then you might want to be more conservative with those numbers. If you are playing with a bit of a softer number there, where maybe you could potentially redeposit or whatever you wanted to do there, maybe you can be a little bit more on the aggressive side of that. It also depends on your edge in the sport, right? If you're, if you have if you can demonstrate a really successful, profitable process for league, and maybe you have a high ROI, something like that, maybe you can play on a little bit more of the aggressive side of that. But I think those are decent heuristics. 2.5% to 5% for any given slate, no more for any given slate, and for any sets of uncorrelated slates each. For correlated slates, no more than 5% to 10% for all of those correlated slates you might be playing. So like for league, I know, let's just go look. I don't even know what this actually kind of looks like right now. So there's only LPL today. Let's see like there's LPL on Friday. What are the like upcoming slates? Yeah, we don't really have a lot of good stuff here to look at. Let's just back up and go back to like April. April 1st. No, I'm looking for something where there's actual. Okay, so here's a decent one, right? So there was this 5-game LCS slate, right? And then there's also not really. I think you get what I'm saying. Either way. So, fun question here. Before playing DFS, were there certain sports that you didn't like or had no interest in? Mine would be NASCAR. Now I love that sport because of DFS. Golf is a big one that stands out to me. I probably could not have named like more than 3 professional golfers, before I got into golf DFS. It was a sport that I just wasn't interested in at all. And I think it's a really fun DFS sport now. Find it really interesting. Even when I'm not playing DFS now for that particular week's tournament, I'll kind of keep an eye on what's going on, just because I'm a little bit invested into it now. Even baseball. I've been playing baseball DFS for years now. Probably 5 years of baseball DFS. But before that, I had kind of fallen off on following baseball quite a bit too. So baseball, I've definitely gotten a lot interested back into as a result of DFS. I've always followed basketball and football. Those have always kind of been my main two. So yeah. But yeah, it's a good question. I would say the big one that definitely stands out is golf. And I would say I've basically gotten completely introduced to NASCAR, MMA, Formula One, all of those via DFS, right? But golf is definitely the one that I would actually say I'm probably at least somewhat a fan of the sport now. Even if golf DFS went away and just disappeared one day, I'd probably still keep an eye on golf. And I don't know if I could say the same for NASCAR and MMA at the moment, but that's part of the beauty of DFS and even responsible sports betting in general. That's why I'm, even apart from the fact that I'm so directly involved in this industry, I really do feel like the leagues and the, sport associations for these sports should embrace the betting world, because it raises interest in the game, right? Even just a little bit of recreational fun sweats, right? I mean, that's I think the NFL has always been a giant, but has so much to thank fantasy football, just seasonal fantasy football office and friends and family leagues for, because it has just blown that market up. And I think a lot of these other sports can, I don't know, have something similar. I think in particular, sports betting and prop betting and same game parlays and things like that have really gotten very popular in NBA in the past couple of years as well. And I think part of the reason that the NBA is seeing a bit of a popularity surge is because of that. So, but Enigma said, yeah, I get it. It's fine on a Saturday to play LPL/LCK plus EU plus NA and use 2.5 to 5% on each one, as they are independent of each other. Yeah, since they're completely independent, it's basically just a pure coincidence that they happen to be on the same day, right? They have the outcomes of one actually have no relationship to the outcomes of the other. If they were played on Monday, Tuesday, and Wednesday, you would do that anyway, and those outcomes are not related. So yeah, I think that's fine. It can feel pretty weird sometimes to have a ton of your bankroll allocated on a day, especially if you play multiple sports like that. But yeah. Patrick says, any updates on full simulations for tennis? Wimbledon is around the corner. No real material updates. It is still our goal to have support by Wimbledon. So we still have some time there. We are working on it. It's in progress. But I don't have an update beyond that. So, Okay. Let's jump back over to Slack. A couple other questions have come in here. This is from Dwayne. He said, how come there isn't a way to update player projections before building for NBA single game contests? I know we can increase exposures, but if I think a player is going to outperform another fantasy point wise, is there a way to tell the sim beforehand before building so it can incorporate them? Yeah, you can do that. You can change projections, right? Maybe you like Curry tonight. 45 fantasy points. Boom. So maybe I'm confused. Maybe you're talking about something else. But you should be able to do that. One thing to keep in mind, I always prefer to edit player projections on the utility spot. We'll automatically update the captain since it's just a multiplier over that. So I prefer to do most of my edits in the utility spot. But yeah, you can do that. Let me know if I'm missing something there. Kino said, low buy-in GPPs have 19 to 20% rake. Isn't this too high and we risk getting rake trapped as in microstakes poker? I think rake is more about 15 to 16% in low stakes. 19 to 20 is a lot. I hope we don't get that high. I think if you are finding 19 to 20% rake anywhere, you can probably do a little bit better than that and find 15 to 16%. It's still very high. I agree with you there. I think the saving grace is that especially below so on FanDuel and DraftKings, both have restrictions of what what contests successful players can enter. So on FanDuel, if you have, I'm going to try to recite this from memory. If you have $1 million or more of lifetime entry fees or $50,000 or more of lifetime profit, you cannot enter any contest under $3. On DraftKings, if you have I think it's just $1 million of entry fees. There might be a profit line there as well. You cannot enter any contest under $3 or any contest under $5 with a $25,000 prize pool or less. So those are also the highest raked contests, but I do think you earn back a little bit of that because of you have a fishier pool of players taking up equity in those contests. You could go play, the $100 stakes and get your rake down to 10%, but then you are generally facing a tougher opponent there as well. In our contest selection analysis that we just conducted, basically what we found is that those factors roughly cancel each other out and even lean a little bit more in the favor of probably lean even just moderately more in the favor of filling the lowest entry fee contests first. There is a significant difference. A really good case study, and a case study that we actually experimented with, is the four-seamer, the $4.20 max for baseball, because that contest alternates from being a experienced players allowed contest to an experienced players not allowed contest, depending on the slate. And there is I wonder what the actual number is. Let me see. Might as well just actually say what the actual number is here. Let's see. Okay. Okay, so there's this. Oops. Okay, so when comparing these two, one sec. This is what I'm looking at here. So you basically earn back 3.5 points. You essentially earn 3.5 points of ROI, of margin back, by playing a contest, at least when comparing these two to one that is a lower experienced contest, right? So it's not the whole difference, right? But you essentially get to play what could be thought of as a lower raked contest when you are in a non-experienced contest versus a high experienced contest. So Enigma said, is that spreadsheet you looked over in the contest selection video available? Because it would be great to look over it all. Let me, I will ask, I think maybe we'll probably put a read-only copy up somewhere. Let let me just double check with the team and make sure that that's okay. I'm sure it is, but I think we'll probably want to duplicate it and make a lock it down so that nobody ruins the fun for everybody else. But yeah, I think we should put that up somewhere. So I'll double check and see if we can put a link up to that, because there's some data here. I know I've had it up on screen a lot. We talked about it a lot on the stream last week. So I'd love for everybody to be able to play around with that themselves. So. Yeah. So honestly, so Kino, I had asked, would you mind opening the lobby for FanDuel or DK and do a rake analysis? Maybe I got it wrong. Honestly, what I would recommend, so Roto Grinders has an extension. And they have one for Chrome and Firefox at least. And I would just install this. This makes your life a lot easier. So they will just calculate rake for you. So you can see margin 15%, 14% here, 15.82, 15.85. You'll see most of the low stakes stuff here is almost always 15.9. So if we look, 15.8, right? 15.8, they're all around there. I think that's just like way easier than calculating it yourself. You get a little bit more useful information here when you click this as well. It'll automatically calculate for you percentage to top first, percentage to top 10, min cash, what percentage of the field gets paid out. It's a pretty nice little extension there. I would just download it and go that route. So, okay. And then a meme had asked a question and said, NASCAR ownership slider on GPP defaults to 0, intentional, I assume. Not entirely. So our NASCAR sliders are basically set just to 0, 0, 0 or 0, 0, 10 for everything, which is basically going to be building optimals for single race simulations. I think they do a pretty good job. I think they get you pretty close in terms of what kind of lineups you are looking for, but these have not yet been back tested in the way we have for other sports. I would say, so two things here. First of all, along with that, our ownership projections, when we have them, use our own projections as the primary input. So we are going to assume if we think a driver is an elite play, that everyone thinks that driver is an elite play. I think that's going to mean most of the time our ownership projections are pretty decent. I think there are opportunities to add a lot of value to them. So I think some level of ownership fade, at least in the interest of creating more unique lineups, something between 0 and 3 for like very large field tournaments, I think feels kind of right. But I think as you increase the ownership fade slider, it might be worth checking some other sources or using your own research or intuition to make some adjustments to the ownership numbers, especially for drivers that we maybe think are a little bit outliers there. So I also, this is going to get a little bit, I guess this gets a little bit more meta, but I think ownership ends up becoming really important once a sport, I think once projection systems on average are pretty good, I think ownership starts to become more important, right? If you think back to DFS even just a few years ago, like NBA DFS 4 or 5 years ago, there was so much of an edge in knowing even just the injury report, but also the rotations and who is going to get minutes, that you didn't have to worry about ownership at all because the field wasn't very sharp, right? You could just be right. I think NASCAR is a little bit still like that. I think our sims are really good. I think our projections and simulations for NASCAR are really good. I think a lot of what is out there is not great. I think, and it's also very hard to use. NASCAR is a sport that is really, really tough to beat with average projections and a traditional optimizer, because you will get lineups that have no win equity just optimizing for cash lineups. And I think in theory, against a sharper field, it might make sense to incorporate some ownership fade. I don't know. I don't even know for now how much you necessarily need to have. So anyway, I guess all of this to say, one, first of all, it is a to-do for us to, one, incorporate an ownership model that does not just use SaberSim as the primary input. That includes other models that kind of brightens up the ownership projections a little bit. Two, another to-do on our end is to backtest and optimize the sliders for different contest types. And then I guess three, in the meantime, I kind of think that something resembling the default sliders is probably still the optimal way to play for now. If you want to include a little bit of ownership fade, I would probably stay pretty low here to not overvalue it and study the ownership projections. We obviously don't have any for this week's event here. I could go back to last week and make adjustments here based on your own research. So. All right, cool. Matt said, or could you develop something similar to the template you put out at the start of baseball season with contest selection, the one where you could sort by effective entrance, et cetera? Yeah. I think that's a good idea. I think I'd definitely like to do that. I can do that for baseball. I will definitely by the start of the next major sports seasons do that for other sports. So like by football and basketball for sure. I think it is our plan to have college football support ready here, at least maybe even if not for the first day of college football, early in the season. I would do it for the college football lobby there as well. I would like to get it done for baseball as well too. So I guess the point here, the plan is to continue doing those contest selection videos for each sport using this new framework. I do think this framework actually is easier to use than the old one, personally, because it doesn't really require you to calculate anything outside of what is available for you on the app, or not even the app, the site. Right? Like part of the reason why we needed a spreadsheet to use the old method is because we had to calculate effective entrance. And that can be a little bit hard to do, especially for like the 150 maxes. Now I think it's pretty easy to just go through first and do, hey, here's my diversifier contests. Let me get 50 to 75% of my bankroll in those. I'm going to fill smallest entry fee to largest. And then once you fill those, fill the remaining allocation with the elevator contest, smallest entry fee to largest. Right? You can do it pretty quick in the sites. But yeah, I do want to record some more of those videos. So Patrick said, did you play baseball last night? Tigers Skubal was scratched and then unscratched after the game lock, had to settle for Carlos Rodon. I did. And I had 0 Skubal. It was a weird situation. So yeah, nothing to be done there. I know you had asked yesterday about like how to deal with weather. And that's just another classic example of weird baseball weather variance affecting the slate in a strange way. I was very happy for all the SaberSim users that had issues getting Skubal out of their lineups, that they at least didn't have dead lineups there, because I know that happened to a few of you guys. So I'm glad that worked itself out, at least somewhat. But yeah, I ended up, I was in like a mad dash to get everything in at the last second. So I took Skubal out and I had time to totally rebuild and do things. I ended up fortunately on a ton of Verlander. So I didn't have a crazy night last night, but I had a profitable night, which is always good. Again, based on our research here, your profitable days per month in a lot of these contests are like 5 to 8. So always nice to get one of those. Yeah, but I got pushed onto a lot of Verlander. I was actually kind of under on Rodon, which also I think kind of worked out pretty well. And I was actually pretty on pitching last night. I was over the field on you. I was over the field on Verlander. I was over the field on Kopesh. All of these guys that ended up having pretty nice nights here. I ended up doing pretty well. So yeah, worked out pretty well. Ryan said, do you enjoy the daily sports, MLB, NBA, esports, or once a week sports more? I personally like having more slates, but wondering about your preference. I like being able to play DFS daily. So like in particular, NBA and baseball kind of have a special place for me because they basically have opposite seasons. They're basically in season at the opposite times. And I just like having daily slates. Like, I think it's fun. I think it's fun to solve that puzzle every single day. It is hard to say that anything beats NFL DFS, though. Like, really, like it feels like that's the pinnacle of DFS for me. So, but 3 days a week is great. You get Thursday night football, you get Monday night football, and you get the big Sunday slate. But I do like having daily DFS to play. So, yeah, I think like NFL, NBA, and MLB are still my top 3. And I know those are the most popular ones, but those are, well, I guess they're maybe not. Baseball isn't, I probably wouldn't say baseball is one of the most popular DFS sports anymore. So those are my top 3. But I do want to play, I kind of want to try a little bit more hockey DFS next year. It's just hard because it often feels like I have to choose between that or NBA on a given slate. But maybe next year, on like the Tuesday night NBA slates where there's like 2 or 3 games or 2 to 4 games, maybe I'll play hockey instead. Because I don't know. It's like a sport I really feel like I haven't messed with enough. So, and that's a daily sport. All right. There's another question in MMA about MMA from a me here, and Will got to this before I did. So let's see. This one says, how about in large field MMA where you need the optimal to win? Would you worry about ownership fade if you think your lineups aren't duped? And then Will said, Jordan may have different feelings on this, but dupes are the first thing to worry about with respect to ownership in MMA, but there are still benefits to a lineup having lower ownership. Since it's competing with less lineups, you're also getting more second, third, fourth place equity, all else the same. Yeah, I think in MMA, I think I like the idea. I mean, I think Will makes a really strong point there. And I think in MMA in particular, just because there are less possible lineups to play, the field is going, even if the field wasn't literally sharper. I think, actually, let me put it this way. I think the field is actually probably just sharper in MMA than NASCAR, period, right? Like, I think other tools out there are better. So I think the field does better building MMA lineups, which makes there more value in fading the field, right? I think ownership becomes more valuable, period. But I also think because there are less lineups out there, there are going to be more lineups in a large field GPP that are competitive even just by pure chance. So I think fading ownership for that reason in MMA, I probably would be even more likely to do it than NASCAR, right? Like, if that makes sense. So not only do I think the field is a little bit sharper, even if the field was equally sharp between those two sports, I'd probably still be a little bit more interested in using something like a little bit of ownership fade in MMA, because of the fact that there are less possible lineups there. I personally, the way I end up treating these for most of these sports, is I try to assess things for both NASCAR and MMA on a lineup level. What I am essentially trying to do is ask myself, is that lineup on the whole more likely to be the optimal than that lineup is likely to be played, is mostly what I do. And so I consider ownership for both of those sports. So, okay. Brian says, for the contest selection video, we have a question here. Would it be better on FanDuel to max the 25 cent 150 max, or play 8 entries in the 1776 beanball? Yeah. So I would play, and he's okay. So these are your diversifier contests. So your goal is basically to get to fill these contests lowest entry fee to highest, and get as much lineup and contest diversity as possible here. So what I would probably do here is I would probably max the 2 150 maxes and focus on those. Oh wait, I think I misunderstood. So it's 150 in the quarter and 8 in the 222, or just max the 222. I would do the first option there. In fact, I'm doing something similar to that here, I think, tonight. Right? Because you're getting to spread out your contest diversity quite a bit. You're getting into 3 different diversifier contests, and you're getting to play way more unique lineups. So I would do the first option there. Again, the goal here, when you're thinking about your diversifiers, is really like, how can I minimize my variance, right? What's the lowest variance? What's the way I can spread out the most into these contests? So a lot of times, I know, that may not necessarily be, I don't know, that may not necessarily be super helpful for everybody out there, but I think that does kind of help categorize this. And then on the elevator contests, right, we're trying to maximize our potential EV and our ROI in those contests. So that's why you want to think about things like effective entrants can be useful when you're talking about the elevators, because we're trying to maximize our ROI when those contests have the right lineup in it. So. All right, cool. Wow, this one went fast. It's already 51 minutes here. Let's see. A couple other questions here trickling in. AK said, oh, yeah, a few other questions come in. AK said, I've been playing for 3 months now. I've watched many of the videos and they've been very helpful. I tend to break even on most nights playing a few singles and maxing 25-cent contests. That's great. I'm glad to hear that. You got to remember, breaking even is a great start, especially if you're only been playing for a few months, right? Because you are actually beating whatever the margin is of the contest you're playing, right? You're probably actually beating a 16% rake. So if you were playing rake free, you were probably beating those contests. So AK said, is that indication to keep doing what I'm doing, or how do I know when to change things up? So that was an interesting question, and that was one that came up in our contest selection video, is that, it's actually very hard to tell if you are a profitable player, because the variance curves and swings of a profitable player, even a very profitable player, aren't that different from even a very unprofitable player, right? If you were playing the minimax every single day, if you have a 20% ROI long term, you might see 8 profitable days per month. If you have a negative 10% ROI in the same contest, you might see 6 profitable days per month. Right. And there's a lot of noise there too. It's not as if you're going to land on that every single time. So it's tough to know if you're profitable. Short answer. I would say that's over a 3-month time span. If you're breaking even, you're probably doing something right. I think one of your best tools to see if you could maintain that over the long term, especially if you have a bigger set of data, would be to use a tool like Roto Tracker, and check what your top 1% equity is in those contests. If you are outpacing your top 1% equity and putting, say, 1.8% of your entries into the top 1% of the contest, you are probably going to find that eventually variance swings your way and you have a big score where you realize a lot of your EV all at once. But if you find that maybe your top 1% equity is 0.9 or 0.8 or 1, you might actually be a little bit slightly unprofitable, and maybe you're actually just running somewhat pure. Yeah, let me know if that helps. I think Roto Tracker is a pretty good tool to do that. So Patrick said, what is a better overall for baseball DFS, DK or FanDuel? 5-stack and 2 pitchers on DK, 4-stack and 1 pitcher. I used to play both sites, but not overall profitable. Contest selection is better on DK. I think a lot of it's personal preference. I do think that I think a lot of it's personal preference. I like playing 2 pitchers. I always have. I think FanDuel, maybe I like playing 2 pitchers. I think I like playing 2 pitchers, and I like being able to 5-stack. So both of those things are good. But I do think FanDuel plays a little bit softer. And I also think at maybe a $100 allocation or less, if you are playing less than $100 total per slate. I think FanDuel is a little bit better. FanDuel will let you get more lineups in play at a lower bankroll level more quickly. So if you are adjusting to playing 150 lineups or more, you can do that with just like $40, $45 on FanDuel pretty quickly. Whereas on DraftKings, it can be harder to get more lineups in play more quickly. So I play both. I think a lot of it's personal preference. I think if I had to pick one, I'd probably play DK more. But yeah, good question. Enigma said, how do you do $40 on a Counter-Strike slate? Because, for example, there are so few diversifiers, sometimes you can hardly get $20 down. Yeah, it's going to be tough on some of these smaller sports here. So what I would attempt to do, and some of these are just like so small, like how worth it is this, you know? Yeah, so I would. Okay, yeah. So I mean, there's not even a lot out there. On the flip side, it's only 7 entries to play this contest. So what? It's like, what is that? 7 entries? That's $1. Yeah, $1.75. I mean, I would probably still follow the recommendations, and you're just going to have a little bit of money in like these really. I mean, or you could start here and basically just say that your first diversifier is the $1 and play basically probably fill this. I would assume, right? $14, and then play. This is a 20 max, so yeah, I'd probably play your remaining diversifier portfolio here. I think the big question you'd have to ask yourself is are the dime time and quarter jukebox even worth your time? I don't know if they would be for me. Like, I don't even know if I care about getting a unique lineup into those contests. So I would probably play these two as my diversifiers, and then are there single entries here? This is it. This is like literally it. Okay, if is this really all? This is all there is. I feel like I'm sorting by something and I just can't tell. But I guess not. I guess that's it. Okay. I mean, if this is literally all that's there in the lobby, then, I mean, there's not really a lot to talk about here, right? Like, figure out, I would probably think this is a contest worth at least throwing some lineups into, and then put the rest of your equity into this, right? Like, there's only so much you can do if the lobby is this small. Let's see. Do we have a Formula One slate up here? Right. This is a little bit of a bigger sport. Enigma said there are single entries up. I don't know what's going on here. Why am I not seeing them? Are they not guaranteed? I don't see them. But I don't know. Yeah, I mean, I would say that the framework, I think the framework should still roughly work. You may just have to kind of be flexible in certain spots. And I think ultimately it would be kind of cool to do some analysis on a smaller sport like this, and see what our contest sims actually say. But yeah, I mean, if you were trying to get $200 down here, right? Like, you're just going to have to play this. So, AK said, curious, can RotoTracker pull from previous months or start once you have it? It depends on how much it can process your entire past history of DFS from the sites using your history file. But depending on how many contests you've played, how many entries you've actually played, you may have to sign up for a subscription. But I think it's worth it because I think it's one of the better tools out there to get that information and to determine if you are long-term profitable. So cool. All right. I'm going to go ahead and leave it there for today's stream. Again, before we head out, a couple reminders. First of all, Matt will be on stream here tomorrow talking about those changes to the builder, primarily from how we're handling correlation. Very excited about those updates. Come join me here tomorrow. Come join me and Matt tomorrow in the first 20, 30 minutes of the stream and ask any questions you have about that. Really looking forward to that. And finally, before we go, we have a free trial on our site, SaberSim.com. If you've been watching along here today or listening along and you're not already a SaberSim subscriber, free 7 days on our site, no strings attached. If you have signed up with SaberSim in the past and are interested in coming back, we reset everybody's trial at the start of baseball season, so you can get another free 7 days on our site. In the meantime, enjoy the slate here tonight for baseball. Enjoy Game 3 of the NBA Finals, and I will see you guys here tomorrow at 2 p.m. Eastern. Take care.